Class, it's time for another Work Together lab, this one for Module 2. There are 3 labs I'm going to do with you for a total of 30 points, and then you have 3 additional labs that you can work on your own. So I'm going to do the odd labs for this module, and you're going to do the even. Hopefully, if you follow these instructions step by step, as I explain what's going on, it will help you do the work on your own labs. As always, if you get stuck or you need a better explanation or more help, please feel free to get a hold of me. So let me get my screen share going for you. You should be looking at the assignments here in our Zybook. Our Work Together labs are going to be 25, 27, and 29 from the Zybook. And so let's take a look at this one. This one is going to be dividing input integers. Integer division in Java is truncation. So you only divide the whole number parts of there is no digit to the right of the decimal point. If you take a number like 5 and you divide by 2, you will wind up with 2, not 2.5. Anything to the right of the decimal point is just truncated. So what they're asking us to do is the user is going to input a number and then the number to divide that number by. So the user will input, in this example, 2,000 divided by 2. Now, the program wants you to do this division 3 times. So the first time you divide by 2, you should get 1,000. Now the user number is 1,000. So we're going to divide by 2 and get 500. And then you're going to divide by 2 and get 250. And if we look at the setup here, they do give you a note that there are no fractions. You get rid of anything to the right of the decimal point in the result. You have on line 1, import Java utility scanner. This means that we have user input, so you're going to have to put it down here in your box. And what we're going to do is we're going to input, as we test this program, the answers they gave us here, input, because we know what the answer will be. I really encourage you to be able to do the program by hand before you try to code it. If you don't know what the right answer is going to be, how are you going to know your program is working? You can't code a solution until you know how to get the answer manually without using a computer. And that sometimes is the hardest part of programming, is crafting that solution. If you get stuck in crafting a solution, if you need this program explained more, then please get a hold of me, because if you don't understand what the program's supposed to do, there is no way you will code it correctly. So we have our input from the user. The name of this file is lab program, so the class has to be named lab program. The Java class, if you have a main here and you're going to run it, this is the name of the file. So class name is the same as the file name. We're going to run this program, this class, so we have to have line 4, public static void main, with our arguments from the command line. That's a given. And notice when they set this up, they have these braces placed for you, and then they have the close braces. I encourage you to do that when you're doing your programs by yourself. If you open a new block of code for something, and as we get more complex programs, you're going to have to open up blocks for selection statements and looping statements and methods and all these other things we're going to program. If you open up one, always put the closing one in there too. Even though you've got stuff to put in the middle, it's just to make sure you get that closing brace in there, because that's one of the most common problems when you're debugging a program. If you've got an error, is matching up these braces to make sure your blocks are the same. Okay, so we're going to read in 2 values using the scanner, and then we need to do this division 3 times. It tells us we're going to need 2 variables. Integer variable usernum and divnum are our input. And notice it says output usernum divided by divnum 3 times. There are no other variables given up here, so don't declare them. You only have 2 variable locations to work with. So we need user input. So let's get our scanner first. You must have a scanner to use user input off the keyboard. The scanner class actually allows you to hook up this input into other things, but for what we're doing, we're always going to hook it up to our keyboard. You can name the scanner anything you want. Zybooks happens to name it SCNR, but you can name it input, user input, whatever you want. It's the scanner is the thing. It's a pipeline from your keyboard buffer to the program when it's running. And I think I hit my delete key there. I need to get rid of that. So we'll name it SCNR, and then we're going to hook it up. The scanner is a class. We want a new instance of that class. So a new scanner object. And what are we going to hook it up to? System.in. So this creates your pipeline from your keyboard buffer into this program. Okay, then they told us we needed 2 integer variables. The type is int. The name is usernum. And the second one is int. And it is divnum. Notice the camel casing here. When you do classes, you start with a capital letter and camel case it. When you do anything else inside of a class, you usually start with a lowercase letter, but it's still camel cased if there's a second word to it, if it's a compound. Okay, so this sets up our variables that we need to work with. Now I need to read in those 2 numbers out of this input box. And the first one here is larger, so I know it's usernum. And what is usernum? It's the next integer in the keyboard buffer that's hooked up to the scanner. So scanner.nextInt. And so what this does is it goes to the buffer, which is just a memory location that has everything you've typed in with your keyboard. And it's going to read off an integer. And this is the buffer, this box down here. And notice there's a space between these 2 items. When you do a read using the scanner like this, nextInt starts at the beginning of the buffer, and it reads whatever is there until a space. So now the buffer is sitting at this blank space. The 2000 has been consumed and stored in our variable user number. So now we can get the div number. Scanner is the object that reads from the buffer, and the method of the scanner class I want to use is next int. And that's why you'll see the parentheses on these things. Just like up here, this is a method, main. It has parentheses after it. This one has an argument in it. It's the string from the command line. We create a scanner that's an object. This is a parameter that's passed to that creation. When we use this object scanner, we call one of its methods next int. The method has these parentheses. So anytime you're calling one of these methods, you're going to have parentheses after the method. Sometimes there'll be things in it, like in main. Most of the time there won't be. We're not going to pass any parameters to it. But now I have my two numbers. And you can prove this to yourself just by putting in a system.out print line. And then print out these two things. Usernum, that's the name of the variable. I'll concatenate a space, so I separate the two of them. And then I'll put in divnum. And I encourage you to do this. All programs are input, processing, output. Every single computer program, that's all it is. So we've just done the input part. Let's test it. What I should get for output here is what I entered. So I have a 2000 and a 2. I'm in developer mode, so this isn't going to get graded. What am I missing? If you get this error, cannot find symbol, it means you have a spelling error somewhere in your name. And I do. I will tell you right now, I'm a notoriously bad speller. I'm not a good typist. I'm a hunting pack. So I know this one because I do it all the time. And it's okay. If you can't find the symbol, it means it points right to where it is. It told me in this line, it didn't know what divnum was. And that's because I had dicenum up here. So now see, there's my input. Here's my output. I've echoed my input to my output. Yay. I know I'm getting these numbers in. And you can prove it again. You change this. Change it to something else. And run the program. Whatever I input up there, I output. So I know on lines 10 and 11, I have the right values in my variables. Okay, so now we need to do the solution part of this. We've got our input. Our output is always going to be just the user number. That's what the instructions said. It said output the user number up here. Output user num. So there it is. System.out.println user num. Now it's going to do it 3 times. This is the last time it will have the carriage return line feed with it. The 2 times before that, I'm just going to do print. So I'll print them all out on one line. Because if you look up here, the output they gave us as a sample prints them all out on one line. So I need to make sure I do the same thing. This is the result of the first division, then a space, second division, then a space, third division. So the third division will have the print line. Okay, so what's our first one? Our first one is user num. Now remember, they only gave us 2 variables to work with here. So I'm not going to create a third variable to store the results or anything. I'm just going to restore the answers inside of user num. And that's equal to user num divided by div num. Not 2, not not the input number. I'm not taking 2000 divided by 2. I'm taking whatever is stored in user num and dividing it by whatever is stored in divnum, so that the user, this program is very flexible. Every time you run it, you can give it different input. Okay, so let's see. I've done a division. Let's just print it out. I should be getting 1,000. Oh, I changed my numbers here, so it's 2,000. Let's put it back to what we had. And now I should get 1,000. There. So there's the first one. Now it said to keep dividing this. Okay. Now what's stored in usernum is usernum divided by divnum, because I did this operation and then I stored it back into usernum. That's what this equals sign is. It's not equals anymore. It's not equivalency. It's assignment. So the memory location usernum is assigned the value of usernum divided by divnum. Now I need to do it again. Okay, so this is the second one. Now, when I do the printout, though, I don't just want to copy this line. Because watch what happens on the output. There's no space there. It's two prints together. So I wind up with 1,500 all crammed together. So what I want is before you print out usernum, print out a blank space. Then concatenate the usernum. Okay. That looks correct. I got 1 and 2. Now I just need the third. And this is my last one. And all last statements in our Xylabs need that carriage return line feed. So I'm going to change this to print line. There we go. Now I've got the same output as the example that they gave us. So I'm pretty confident this code is correct. These are integers. They'll do integer division. So if you gave it something uneven here, like 5 divided by 2, you're not going to get 2.5. You're going to get 2 because it truncates it. And then you're going to get 2 divided by 2, which gives you 1. And then you're going to get 1 divided by 2. And it's integer division. So 1/2 is 0.5. Everything to the right of the decimal point gets truncated, and you just get 0. So I think this is working correctly. Ready to do the submit. Out of 10. So as you go through this and get yours to work, if you have any questions on what I've done here, please get a hold of me. You should be able to follow along with this and get 10 out of 10. Okay, so now let's go on to our next assignment. Next lab, you guys are doing this one on your own. The expression for calories burned during a workout. It is very much the same as what we just did above. 2 parts to it. You're going to write a program that reads in age, weight, heart rate, and time, and outputs the average calorie burned for that person. Except the only change they've made is they only want 2 decimal points. This is, notice that this is not using integers. It's going to have to use, you can read in integers, but your results here where they've got the integers, notice that calories burned is a double, because you want the digits to the right of the decimal point, and you want it formatted, and that's what this is. It gives you the format. And I think when I was scrolling through there, because I've written solutions for all of these, I think I just gave you the solution, but good. 10 points free for you. Okay, let's look at the next one that I wanted to do together, is using math methods. Now, the scanner is a class, and we use the methods in the scanner class when you're reading things in. And this is available in the Java docs. You can see all of this if I'm looking for the scanner class. In the official Java docs from Oracle, you can read all of these. It'll tell you what's needed to use it. The other thing it will give you is all the methods you can use. So you can have a scanner.close, scanner.hasNext, and we'll get into some of these other methods later in the semester. But the ones we always use are these next with strings. We read in next. Here's our next int that we've used. So your Java docs are going to tell you all these different methods you can get out of this class when you create an object of this class. And one of the other ones we use all the time, in addition to scanner, are the math classes, because you don't have to write your stuff like exponentiation or getting a random number or something. So if we look at the math class in the Java docs, here are all the methods you can have: absolute value, a cosine, sine, tangent, the ceiling and floor, exponentiation, and get exponents to do exponentiation. You've got max, you've got min. So you have all of these math methods. And what we want to do in this lab is get used to using a couple of them. So we're going to be calling methods in the math class. What we're going to do is read in 3 floating numbers, x, y, and z, output x to the power of z. That's the first calculation we have to do. X to the power of y, but y is to the power of z. So first you do y to the power of z, then x to the power of y to the power of z, the absolute value of y, and the square root of x times y to the power of z. Now, they don't expect you to know how to do that in your head. We have 3 floating point numbers, real numbers. They have a value to the right of the decimal point. And here's the output we should get for those 4 operations. So down here, let's put in, line 1 has a scanner. That means we're going to use this box. So let's put in those values so that we can double check our calculations as we go. 3.5, 4.5, 2.0. Make sure you got a space between there, because you're going to have to read in the doubles. Okay, so I've got my lab program, public static void main. They've set up my scanner. They've given me a double X, Y, and Z. So the first thing we have to do, they've declared the variables. We have to read in those values into the variable, though. So let's do an assignment here. X is going to get the value scanner. That instead of next int, we're going to use next double, because these variables are doubles. And then y next double. And then z next double. And again, at this point, you can double check that you're actually reading in the values by writing yourself a system.out. And I'll just print line X plus a space, Y. Let's see, I got X, Y, X space, Y space, Z. What did I spell wrong up here? Oh, I did what I just told you to do on that last lab, and I forgot. Call your method. It's got to have the parentheses there. There we go. And yes, I have echoed my input to my output. So now I can work on my processing. Now, they didn't say for you to create any other variables. You're just supposed to do these math operations and output the result. So what we're going to do is, instead of creating any new variables or doing any assignments, I'm just going to do the calculation and put it into my print line. And what I mean by that is the first one is X to the power of Z. That's a math function. It's called power. And if you look over here in your Java docs, like say you didn't know what this method absolutely did, come down here and find power, P-O-W, and it says it takes a double A and a double B and returns the value of the first argument raised to the power of the second argument. So what I need is math power X, Z. And it's going to return that value. That first answer should be 12.96. So as soon as I put this call to power, I should run this, and that 3.6 should be replaced with 12.96, and it is. Because math power returned that value. So when I went to print it out, that value is what's stored at that location. It's not saved forever. You can't recall it. It hasn't been assigned to a variable, so I couldn't use it again, but I can get the value that it outputs. Now I need to replace the second one. And what they said it is X to the power of X to the power of Z. So it's math power again. And remember, it's the first thing and then the thing you're going to raise it, the exponent you want to raise it to. So the first thing is X, and then the exponent I want to raise it to is math power, and its first thing is Y raised to the Z. And we should get, if that statement's correct, that big long 1.8413 number. And we do. Exponent 11, exponent 11. So we're correct there. Put another space. The next thing it wanted was the absolute value. And that's the ABS method in the math class. That was the absolute value of Y. I'll put the space in here because we're going to have another one after that. And I get my 4.5. That's what I should have. And then the last one is the square root of x times y to the power of z. It's math.sqrt is square root. And what do I want the square root of? Math.power. The first parameter is x times y. I should do this lowercase because it's not capitalized. So it's the power of x times y. And then the second parameter is z. I may have forgotten yeah, I forgot a closed paren right there. So it even told me, see, it says it expected a closed paren. And I'm doing these like I'm crafting the solution as I go along in order to generate some of these errors, because that's what you're going to see. And here it's saying that I need another one. And if you come up here and you count them, I need one for this print line. This one's open and closed. This one's opened and closed. This one's opened and closed. This one's opened and closed. And then this one's open and closed. This one's open and closed. But I still needed one more for that print line. And so hopefully in these videos, since I'm generating the same errors you're going to be generating, you'll see how to solve them. Did we have the exact same answers? Yes, we do. We're ready to submit this. Ten out of 10. So this one, you may not, some of you may not have had college algebra yet, and some of these math functions may be confusing for you. If you need help on them, please get a hold of me, and I'll show you how to use some of these that you don't even know what they mean yet, because you always go back to this Java docs, and if somebody says, oh, I want you to give me, you know, a power, and you don't know what a power is, you go to the function. This tells you what the input has to be, and that'll return the value of the first argument raised to the power of the second argument. You don't have to know what this means, raised to the power. You just know how to use it. Okay, so let's go on and do our last one. You're doing simple statistics. The only note I would make sure here to pay attention to your integers. These are integers. You input 4 integers and output their average. The integers have nothing to the right of the decimal place. But if you do averages, you're gonna have something. You may have something. So make sure you know that the integer division is going to truncate that. Now, this one I wanted to do because it uses strings. And strings are a different beast. The strings are a class, just like math, just like scanner. And I bet I can just get string up here. The primitive data type is characters. Strings are an array of characters. It's a class, just like scanner is a class, just like math is a class. So when you're working with strings, which means a collection of alphanumeric characters. Literal strings are these things that you put quotes around. It's a literal. The value of that thing is the string ABC. But you can also have variable strings, like see here, the string C and D are string variables. And so you can output the value of the variable. And you have a whole bunch of other methods you can use. And we'll be using many of them throughout the semester. Things like substrings. The character at, so you can get the first and last character within a string. You can compare strings. You cannot say this string equals that string because they're not primitive data types. They're classes, they're objects of a class. And so you've got to use this, where one variable is a string and the other variable is a string, and then it will go ahead and do the comparison for you. So what we want to do is we're going to input a string this time, a name, and then the output is another string. It's hello, then whatever the user input, then a comma, then a space, and the rest of that line. Okay, so we have a scanner. We're going to be using input. So let's start with what they gave us, Pat. And notice how you read in a string. It's with next. And this will read in alphanumeric characters. So if you had 1, 2, NB7, and you said it was an integer, it would not read it correctly. You'd get an error. But if you say it's a string, it'll read in whatever's in the input buffer until it hits a blank space. So when we're doing user input, a lot of times we'll use next in case your user makes a mistake, so you can check it. But if you know it's going to be a string, do not use next int, do not use next double, use next. It'll pull in whatever's there until the first blank space. Okay, so what we're going to have to print out is a concatenation of whatever the user printed in. System.out. Always we need a carriage return line feed on the final output, so I'm going to use the print line method. And so the first thing I need to print out is hello, and that space that's in there, you have to tell the output that you need that space. So this needs to be hello space. And then we'll concatenate it to username. And then we need everything that comes after it. And I'm going to do a shortcut here, and rather than try to type that without making an error, I'm just going to copy it. Notice I'm grabbing that comma because I want that comma, there's no space in front of it. I want that comma to appear right after the name. So let's run this. Oh, I need to close this all off. That's the end of my string. That's the end of my print line method. And that's the end of my statement. Okay, so you could change it to whatever name you wanted. And then we'll submit it. This one's very short. It's very easy, but I wanted to show you how to work with strings to get them in and introduce the strings and the string method. There we go. 10 points. Yay. So if you follow along with this video, you should get your 30 points. As always, if you have any questions on what you're doing, if you get an error that's different than all those common errors I get, or you get an error and you need a deeper explanation, please just get a hold of me and I'd be happy to explain it to you. But this should get you through the 3 labs I've assigned. They're a little bit more involved. Pull them apart piece by piece, get your input. Make sure you got it by doing some kind of output on what your input was, echo it to your screen, and then incrementally work on your processing. In that develop mode, you can do it piece by piece and make sure you're getting the right answer before putting it all together. And so hopefully those won't be any problem for you. If they are, get a hold of me. I will see you at our next video, where we're going to learn how to install and use our IDE. So I'll see you next video. Bye.